I was born in New York. I actually lived in New York for 18 years before I came down to Salisbury to go to college. Yeah, so it was Salisbury State University back then.
Yeah, right.
So I lived in Salisbury for quite some time. Got my degree in history, secondary education. And got a job teaching right out of college, 1998. So this is year number 21 of teaching in public schools. I met my wife Christine at Salisbury. We got married in 2002. Lived in Salisbury, lived in Hebron, in 2007 we decided to move up here because she had been working here since 1998, working for the state. And so she was doing the drive back and forth for a long time. And so I said, well, we'll move up to Easton and I'll do the drive for a while. And we got a house in Matthewstown Run and have been living there since 2007. We have a son, Jacob, who is in Easton Middle School. And we have a daughter, Maddie, who is in Easton Elementary School. But in 2009, I joined the Easton Volunteer Fire Department. Still an active member. This is my 10th year. I'm in my 10th year of service to the department. The last 2 years, they elected me president of the department. So that involves meeting with the mayor, town council, town manager to discuss, personnel issues, budgetary issues. So I've been doing that for the last 10 years in Easton. I think the main reason why I wanted to do this is something that was instilled in me when I was young, and that's service. Service to the community that you live in. It's the reason why I became a school teacher. It's the reason why I've been in the fire service for the last 10 years. I believe in service to the community. I think, my father had served in the Marine Corps, had been a school teacher for decades. My mother was a school teacher. She worked with the youth in our church where we grew up. I mean, they just believe that that is something that you're supposed to do. And as president of the department, I got to get a pretty good understanding of how the town council works. And I was really impressed with what I saw. It was really something that interested me. And when my term of service as president came to an end, it also happened to coincide with the fact that Pete Lecher had won the county council seat. That it was like, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll give this a shot to continue serving the community. Well, I think one of the priorities would be workforce housing. I think that that's something you've heard a lot of. Affordable housing is what we've heard a lot of, but workforce housing. One of the things that goes along with a stronger economy is the fact that housing market improves. And as a result of the housing market improving, the price of houses have gone up, which is great if you're currently already a homeowner. Everybody wants to see their investment of their time, their money, show fruit. And that's great if you're a current homeowner, but for a lot of people who come to work in Easton, they can't afford a house in Easton. And we're talking about people in the medical field, the education field, the law enforcement. And so as a result, they can't live here. They can work here, but they either have to rent or they have to live outside of town somewhere. And so I think one of the things that the Easton Town Council needs to take a look at is incentivizing home builders. And I'm not just talking about like the home builder that's going to come in and put 200 houses on the outskirts of town somewhere. I'm talking about also the smaller home builder, the local guy who is going to do an infill project where there's a couple of lots in town that can be purchased and built on. And when you incentivize those guys through the structure of fees, you try to get them to build the kind of houses that a policeman, a teacher, a nurse can afford. I think that's really important. Now, of course, you're going to sit there and say, well, you can incentivize that, but then what if they turn around after getting the restructuring of fees? The town will have to stay on top of things and make sure that they don't go around and try to sell the house for $400,000. I think that would obviously be a priority for the town to maintain. But I think it's worth the investment. I think a lot of times people will say, well, what about the fees? How can the town afford to do that? I think what's more important is the investment in having these people living in town. It is about, it's really, how can the town not want to do this, not afford to do that? I mean, we really need to look at who is living in Easton. We want teachers, we want police officers, we want nurses to be living in town. And I think this incentive is definitely worth the investment. So Easton Point. Easton Point is going to happen. The land's been annexed. The plans are in the works. And I think it will be a great destination for residents and for tourists who come to town. And we are fortunate that our downtown area is stronger than other downtown areas on the shore. But I think if the emphasis were to totally switch to Easton Point, I think we would, I think the downtown area would start to suffer, because there are some businesses that are having a tough time in downtown. And I think we need to make sure that both Easton Point and the downtown receive the proper attention. And link those two places together. You know, I remember watching the town engineer talk about, Mr. Van Emberg talk about a walking path. And I think that's a great first step to linking the two places together. I think something else that the town needs to possibly consider is some kind of shuttle or trolley service that would run back and forth between the two. Because with both of those two places, Easton Historic Downtown and Easton Point, I think both of them working together are going to be beneficial to the town. Right, because property values, if you have all that development at Easton Point, what's that going to do to property values that people live on Port Street? And then are they going to be taxed out of their homes?
Yeah, so what would you say to that concern?
And I think, again, watching something when President of the Council, John Ford, was on here, I think that that's something that the Easton Town Council needs to be pay very close attention to. Because these are historic communities, these are neighborhoods that have been around for quite some time. And I think it would be a detriment to Easton if all of a sudden somebody whose family has been living in a certain house or a certain part of town is all of a sudden taxed out of it. I think that would be a big mistake. And I think, for example, both of my kids have gone through Easton Elementary School, and Easton Elementary School is predominantly Hispanic now. And I think that has gone a long way, as far as my kids are concerned, to preparing them for what life is like. It's going to be like, because you're not just going to go to school, or you're not just going to live your life with people of a particular ethnicity or race or whatever. And so I think that it's important, as far as I'm concerned, that this is something that I've grown up with, and also something that teaching-wise I've dealt with. I think it's very important, because there are a lot of neighborhoods and individuals in this town that, you know, they don't look like me, but they have, I think, the same desires, which is, you know, a safe place for my kids to grow up. And I think it's just crossing maybe a language barrier or a cultural barrier, but I think it's definitely worth it, because you can't just have one particular part of a group in town or part of town driving the decision making, because everybody lives in Easton. And so whether it's a language barrier or a cultural barrier, I think that those need to be overcome. Definitely one of the big issues for firefighters, for Easton, and this kind of ties into government, is the fact that your volunteer service is dependent upon recruitment. We have to keep bringing new people in. And I think recruitment for the volunteer service is something that the town has supported, and the county. And I think the reason why they support it is because they realize that people are not always going to be able to stay in the department. Things are going to happen, life changes, people are going to have to leave. So the town's done a very good job of supporting us in that endeavor. And it's kind of hard to get somebody to volunteer, because if you think about it, you're telling them they've got to go through training, hours and hours of training. They've got to go through the ability to leave what they're doing, drop it at a moment's notice, and head off to a situation that's possibly dangerous or even life-threatening. And by the way, you're not going to get paid for it. And I think that that's very difficult to attract people today. And a lot of times when people leave the service, it's for, you know, again, life-changing issues, but it's also a lot to do with time. They just don't have the time to commit because of the amount of training that we got to do and the amount of fundraising. The town does an excellent job of supporting us, The county does a great job considering their financial constraints and supporting the fire department. But the Easton Volunteer Fire Department, for example, we do 54 fundraisers a year. That's more than one a week. You know, we're getting ready to receive into service a brand new rescue truck, because our current rescue truck is from the 1990s. And we're getting ready to receive that. And that rescue truck that we're paying for, it's not being paid for by the town or the county.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, is $800,000.
How can
As a history teacher, I can tell you one of the things I've learned teaching government and history, when politicians make a lot of promises, it usually ends badly for them. So I would say that the promise, I would make one promise. Okay, I'll do one promise to the voters, and that is that I will do my best to represent them. And what I mean by that is I will be prudent with their money, because I think that that's a major factor. People don't just want the government to be spending it on random things. They really want to know exactly what the money's going towards. And I would respect the trust that they put in you, and put in me if they elect me, because that's a major deal. I take that very seriously. And so, yeah, that would be my promise to the voter is that, you know, I would be prudent with their money, but I would also respect their decision to let me do this. And I hope I can serve them well. So.